My thesis for today is that our own spiritual growth and our capacity to build just and beloved community depends upon our capacity to more clearly understand, grapple with, and talk about the dynamics of power at play in our lives, in our society, and in our world.
I share a story with you this morning called The Tiger Who Would Be King by James Thurber. One morning, the tiger woke up in the jungle and told his mate that he was king of beasts. "Leo the lion is king of beasts," she said. "We need a change," said the tiger. "The creatures are crying for a change." The tigress listened, but she could hear no crying except that of her cubs. "I'll be king of beasts by the time the moon rises," said the tiger. "It will be a yellow moon with black stripes in my honor." "Oh, sure," said the tigress, as she went to look after her young, one of whom, a male, very like his father, had got an imaginary thorn in his paw. The tiger prowled through the jungle till he came to the lion's den. "Come out," he roared, "and greet the king of beasts. The king is dead. Long live the king." Inside the den, the lioness woke her mate. "The king is here to see you," she said. "What king?" he inquired sleepily. "The king of beasts," she said. "I am the king of beasts," roared Leo, and he charged out of the den to defend his crown against the pretender. It was a terrible fight, and it lasted until the setting of the sun. All the animals of the jungle joined in, some taking the side of the tiger, and others the side of the lion. Every creature, from the aardvark to the zebra, took part in the struggle to overthrow the lion or repulse the tiger. And some did not know which they were fighting for, and some fought for both, and some fought for whoever was nearest, and some fought for the sake of fighting. "What are we fighting for?" someone asked the aardvark. "The old order," said the aardvark. "What are we dying for?" someone asked the zebra. "The new order," said the zebra. When the moon rose, fevered and gibbous, it shone upon a jungle in which nothing stirred except a macaw and a cockatoo screaming in horror. All the beasts were dead except the tiger, and his days were numbered, and his time was ticking away. He was monarch of all he surveyed, but it didn't seem to mean anything. And the moral: you can't very well be king of the beasts if there aren't any. Power by Adrienne Rich. Living in the earth depositus of our history, today a backhoe divulged out of a crumbling flank of earth, one bottle, amber perfect, 100-year-old cure for fever or melancholy, a tonic for living on this earth in the winters of this climate. Today, I was reading about Marie Curie. She must have known she suffered from radiation sickness, her body bombarded for years by the element she had purified. It seems she denied to the end the source of the cataracts on her eyes, the cracked and suppurating skin of her finger ends, till she could no longer hold a test tube or a pencil. She died, a famous woman, denying her wounds. Denying her wounds came from the very same source as her power.
It's January in the United States of America, the growling political season, as we await to see who will become king of the beasts. And I think it's particularly time each year, maybe around this time, maybe always, for us to think about power and how it plays out in ways both obvious and subtle in our lives, in our society, and in the systems that surround us. And so I'd like to start this morning by asking you to take a few moments of self-reflection to help set these musings on power up, because they must indeed come from a place of our experience, as well as from a place of intellect and analysis. So first, I invite you to take a moment of quiet to think of a time when you felt powerless. Consider what it was that prompted your feeling of powerlessness. Remember what it felt like in your body to feel powerless. Remember the emotions that surrounded that feeling and how your mind characterized it. This past summer, we did this exercise in our anti-racism study group as we sought to gain a more personal understanding of the impact that dynamics of power and privilege play out in our worlds and our systems and in our own lives as well. So as I engaged with the study group this summer, as they did this reflection and imagining, they reported back. Some said perceiving themselves to be powerless prompted them to feel anxious, angry, alienated, threatened, timid, ashamed, ignored, frustrated, limited, isolated, unworthy, out of control, crazy, disrespected, and more. Perhaps those qualities resonate from the moment of reflection you just had. But it's important, of course, to consider the flip side as well, as we did in our group this summer, and so I invite you to do the same. Spend a moment now thinking of a time when you felt powerful. Consider the conditions that enabled you to feel powerful. Think of what it felt like emotionally and mentally to hold power. Where and how did you feel that power in your body? In our group this summer, folks reported from this exercise that feeling powerful helped them experience agency, confidence, energy, peace, acceptance, a feeling of physical strength, the ability to be authentically themselves, a feeling of respect, sanity, connection, stability, pride, their full humanity. Perhaps some of these things resonate from your moment of reflection. And I thank you for undertaking this exercise with me, because my thesis for today is that our own spiritual growth and our capacity to build just and beloved community depends upon our capacity to more clearly understand, grapple with, and talk about the dynamics of power at play in our lives, in our society, and in our world. Some of the most dangerous situations we see on the news and in our lives happen when we perceive wrongly where and how the power dynamics are at play. When we perceive that we have less power than we do and thus seek to grab it and protect ourselves. And though each of us has a different life experience in relation to power and privilege, mostly depending on factors largely outside our control, such as gender, ethnicity, sexuality, race, ability, and more. Though our starting point and our experiences are very unique and different, every human person knows what it is like to feel powerless and what it is like to feel powerful. Especially those who tend to be granted more power by our society can and must use that knowledge to become more aware of the dynamics of power at play around us, which are both obvious and subtle, and in which we are always participating. When we are not in touch with power dynamics, it is all too easy to fall into the systems of domination and control that are the standard exercise of power, and that limit the human spirit and deny dignity all around us. As a community who seek to build beloved community, we must understand that the marginalization of some is a result of the systemic removal or denial of power and the consolidation of that same power in the hands of a relative few. To level the game, it is essential that each of us develop a sophisticated analysis of the power at play in our society and moment to moment in our very own lives. The most common way we see power playing out in our world and in our societies particularly is what community organizers call power over. Power over is always an exercise of control and often looks like force, oppression, discrimination, domination. When we feel many of the feelings we described earlier relating to powerlessness, we may be caught up on the wrong side of a situation of power over, which we might experience with alienation, anxiety, shame, frustration, insecurity, and more. Making it harder to identify and resist, power over operates in many different ways. It can be visible in the structures that order our lives. It can be hidden in the behind-the-scenes dealings that then impact all of us. And power over can be entirely invisible as it conditions us socially into internalized bias, hopelessness, and more. In this power over model, power is a zero-sum game that requires winners and losers. In this model, having power means taking it from someone else. And in our society, it means taking it from specific groups who are historically marginalized, and then using it to dominate. In this model, life becomes a never-ending quest for control and a never-ending fight to protect that control. This power over is the default understanding of power in our society, focused as we are on winners and losers, insiders and outsiders, us versus them. Without alternative models based in integrity and relationship, all too often, even we who seek to resist the power structures at hand can end up slipping into repeating the power over pattern by simply replacing one controlling power with another. Think of the story of the tiger who would be king. The people need a change, he said. The lion is a tyrant. They'll be better off with me. Animals joined his cause, fighting for a new order until there were none left and nothing for the tiger to rule. Perhaps the fighting could have been the clue here, that replacing one controlling power with another, one tyrant with another, changes little. And if we are seeking exactly the same power we seek to overthrow, we will never escape the cycles of domination and control that threaten the value and dignity of all our lives. In her essay, Love as the Practice of Freedom, womanist theorist Bell Hooks writes about how easily we are seduced by the ethic of domination that pervades our culture. She writes, often the longing is not for a collective transformation of society, an end to the politics of dominations, but rather simply for an end to what we feel is hurting us. And how human is that? This is why she thinks it is so easy for some to fall into fighting racism while perpetuating the domination of women, or fighting sexism while perpetuating the domination of people of color. Because it is so hard to opt out entirely of the system where we simply replace one power over with another. She writes, if we are only committed to an improvement of that politic of domination that we feel leads directly to our oppression, we not only remain attached to the status quo, but act in complicity with it, nourishing and maintaining those very systems of domination. She continues, until we are all able to accept the interlocking, interdependent nature of systems of domination and recognize specific ways each one is maintained, we will continue to act in ways that undermine our individual quest for freedom and collective liberation struggle. Until we seek to dismantle the system of domination entirely, we will continue to be seduced by power over. One big hint that we've fallen prey to this seduction is when our thoughts and language are formed around a simplistic us versus them mentality, with clear winners and losers. The moment we find ourselves framing our lives as a fight for control with a perceived and uncomplicated other is the moment we have succumbed to power over. Whether that other be liberals, immigrants, Muslims, or the government, or whether that other be conservatives, evangelicals, gun owners, fill in the blank. When we experience and interpret power only as power over, it is clear that power is a negative and sinister force in our world. We can begin to think that all power corrupts and corrodes our spirits by feeding the ethic of domination that destroys beloved community. We can begin, when trained by that system of power over, to encounter our own power with shame. But, as with most forces in our lives, power in and of itself is value neutral. Power will be used for good or ill. It will be a source of dread or hope. Power over certainly is a source of that dread or domination, but it is not the only way to wield or engage power. Indeed, in the world of community organizing, which seeks to build and mobilize people power in the face of oppressions, there are three alternatives to power over. They are power to, power with, and power within. Power to is used simply to describe human agency. It is the power to act in the world uninhibited. This kind of power exercised responsibly is constructive rather than dominating. It doesn't seek to control another, but rather seeks the capacity to act in one's own sphere. When power to is held healthfully and with a priority in relationship, because we never act without our actions impacting others, then power to can lead to engagement in power with. Power with is a phrase organizers use to describe relational agency, or the capacity to share common ground, build collective strength, foster solidarity, and work in collaboration. Power with looks like a group of people coming together thoughtfully and democratically to achieve an end, sharing power and agency by balancing the needs of each participant, and it's hard work. But when they're done right, power to and power with open the way for the fullness of power within. Power within is the spiritual center and bedrock upon which healthy engagement with power rests. Power within is one's sense of confidence in one's own dignity and worth. Our power within is our integrity. When we are rooted truly in power within, we feel no need to control because we are secure in ourselves. And we are able to act relationally with an ethic of love instead of domination, because power within is centered upon a foundation of respect, empathy, and hope. Our goal in this life should be to ensure that each person is able to exercise their power within, what we sometimes call our first principle, the worth and dignity of every person. These three concepts together, power to, power with, and power within, conceive of power not as a zero-sum game requiring a winner and a loser, or an us and a them, but as a dynamic, relational, and fluid force that can be harnessed in the service of greater dignity and hope when we are truly in touch with one another. And this, I believe, is where our spiritual lives come in. Because the big difference between these three productive models of power and the power over model is our relationship to control. Power over another is so tempting because we humans living brief, beautiful lives on a rock hurtling around a star hunger for some illusion of control over our lives and our destinies. We long as human creatures to feel assurance of a security and power that is truly beyond our human grasp. With power over others, we can, at least for a time, feel that security experience that control, but at great cost to our human kin and truly to our own souls. I believe that dynamics of domination are in reality an expression of deep spiritual dis-ease, an inability to accept a basic powerlessness in our universe, and an incapacity to then unite with one another in the face of human fragility. If we are to transform ourselves and our systems toward a more just community of power to and with and within, we will have to take on deep spiritual work, the work of letting go. We will have to get comfortable with discomfort and impermanence. We'll have to get more human. Here we turn away from the story of the tiger who would be king by taking control, and we turn toward the poem we heard from Adrian Rich, the poem that is entitled Power, but then is full of descriptions of bodily fragility. The poem that ends with the line, "Her wounds came from the same source as her power." When our very vulnerability becomes our power, when our wounds link us with all people in the common human experience of the fragile strength of our lives, that's when power gets flipped on its head and things begin to change for us. When we see power in what unites us as humans rather than what helps us control one another, then our dignity begins to shine, and our empathy emerges, and we find true power. I think that's the kind of power we see rolling in waves off the great spiritual teachers of the world. The power of compassion, the power of integrity and inner strength that's rooted in a deep spiritual letting go. And so I invite you now to circle back around to how we began, thinking of the feelings of power and powerlessness in your own lives, because these will be your clues as you seek to live responsively in a world of complex power dynamics. Recalling the times when you have felt powerless, you can remember the feelings that accompanied that, because then you can use those feelings as empathy with those to whom power is systematically denied. And remembering those feelings, you may be prepared when they will come again. But you will also know that your feeling of powerlessness may or may not accurately represent the dynamics at play. When you find yourself feeling ignored, alienated, defensive, or weak, you can get curious about whether you are being seduced by a power over model, or whether there are alternative options for claiming and sharing power to, with, and within. In the same way, as you recall the times when you have felt powerful, you will remember those feelings as well, because you can use those as an impetus to solidarity with others. When you are feeling agency, respect, freedom, and strength, you are in a prime place to look around you and think not about how to consolidate and protect those feelings, but how to celebrate and share them. In a spiritually rooted place of power, we are each able to exercise our authentic selves and therefore to make space for the full authenticity and dignity of those around us. So this is our job in the deeply spiritual work of building beloved community, to continually examine the power dynamics in every situation we encounter, to see them clearly and with a sophisticated analysis, then to center ourselves in our shared human vulnerability, and thus to continually resist the will to control. When we can do these things, we will find joy and connection by sharing our power with those around us, to make space for ours and others' authentic power within, and so doing to live out the true and beautiful power of human dignity, worth, imagination, and hope. So as we take on that not-so-easy task, I leave you with a blessing, excerpted from the late Celtic priest John O'Donoghue, a blessing for one who holds power. May the gift of leadership awaken in you as a vocation, keep you mindful of the providence that calls you to serve. As high over the mountains the eagle spreads its wings, may your perspective be larger than the view from the foothills. When the way is flat and dull in times of gray endurance, may your imagination continue to evoke horizon. May you have the wisdom to read time clearly and know when the seeds of change will flourish. In your heart, may there be a sanctuary for the stillness where clarity is born. May your power never become a shell wherein your heart would silently atrophy. May you welcome your own vulnerability as the ground where healing and truth join. And may integrity of soul be your first ideal, the source that will guide and bless your life. May it be so. May you go forth from this place in power, the power of dignity, the power of integrity, the power of love. Go in blessing and be a blessing to a world that needs your care. Our benediction is printed in your order of service. Let us sing our benediction.